Tell them Blanco sent you. What up, y'all? It's your boy Mac Mizzle, a host with the most don't need to break no boats. All I do is give a toast to the real folk. Let them pave the way in the real way. So it's players to play. And we're gonna talk about it. This one's called Crack in America. Mom's gas tank. Shady. Put up like babies and burn them with dirty 380s. Tear them all out. Fucking real. Here's the deal. I got 100 bricks, 14.5 a piece. Enough to top 6 by the house on the beach. Supply the people cheeks, brick a piece. Capiche? Everybody getting clean. No one's considered the least. Niggas blink now. That's damn near 1.5. I kill them all. I'll be set for life. Frank, pay attention. These motherfuckers is henchmen. If you got it, still get paid. Extra robbery. Fucking robbery. I'm the boy. You want to say hi? I promise. People, you know I have my fingers thrown in this. Say hi. Beef cook. Just like God, picture a nigga hiding my life in that man's hand while he just riding. Just like us, I'd rather go toe to toe with all of y'all running in my protocol. Since it's on, I call my nigga Arizona Ron from Tucson. What's the rack you call? Usually have the slow breeze on. Mostly rock the Ozzy. Stupid as a youngin' chose not to move wisely. Shuffle the game, and niggas crooks called the jokes. Murder was sweet, about 350 a piece. Ron bought a truck, 2 bricks, letting the cut. This beats got bucked, got locked the fuck up. That's when Ron vanished. Came back, speaking Spanish, lavish habits, 2 rings, 20 carats. Yeah. Tell them. Took it to trial, beat it. Now we feel he undefeated. He mean it. Nothing to lose, tattooed around his gun wounds. Everything to gain, embedded in his brain. And me, I feel the same for this money you die. Especially if my daughter crying. I ain't lying, you know the signs. Just like us, picture me being scared of a nigga that breathes the same air as me. Niggas breathe just like us, picture me being shook. We can both pull burners, make them up. Bye-bye. I'm going to bed now. Bye-bye, I'm going to bed. All right. Go to bed. We agreed to go and shoot in the city because niggas could be hot in the shower, but not so I better. Go get your popcorn. Trickles. Long story. Blow see my face. Got shook. Thought a nigga was coming for the safe. Now she breaking. Shut up. 112. What's shaking? A Jamaican. Some bitches, I swear. They look gay in the black. Range Rover been outside all day. If it's trouble, let me know. I'll be on my way. Crack in America. I got kids to feed. I didn't see you make niggas leave. I'm talking about the whole continent of America, man. We about to blow this, get the cash before the cops and Range Rover cats know this room 112. Right by the staircase. Y'all know what time it is. Every area where there's predominantly black people, there's drugs. And devastating, lasting effects. We in the hallway waiting patient. As soon as she hit the door, we start blasting. And we gotta all admit that we felt the ramifications of it. And there wasn't no opioid clean clinics and nothing like that, you know. Not right now, man. Say hi. What's the matter, baby? Say hi. Cutest kids in the world. My baby girl. So bye. I'm gonna sleep now. My bedtime.
Pass me that time.
Charlie Baltimore, Iceberg Slim, the most shaky, like baby. We here know what these things. Do you ain't going nowhere? Ask yourself. Do you know? Ha 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 ha. Check out this before. Rapper style, treated by me. The B.I.G. I put my key, you put your key in. Money will be singing. Release the fucking ceiling. Check. My calico been cop. This rap out with Hitchcock. Drop top notch. When they even gon' stop. This instant. Rappers too persistent. Quick to spit. Biggie name on shit. Make my name taste like ass when you speak it. See you in the street, your jewelry, you can keep it. That be our little secret. See me, me that is, I that is, G Wiz. Motherfucker still in my bed.
Don't you know my nigga gonna fucking kidnap kids?
Fuck them in their ass.
Throw them over the bridge.
That's how it is. My shit is laid out. Fuck that beat shit. That shit is
Played out.
I got the goal. All I make is one phone call. All y'all disappear
by tomorrow. All your guns is borrowed.
I don't feel sorrow. Actually, your man has to
Get to me.
I check this. What's beef? Beef is when you need two cats to go to sleep. Beef is when your moms ain't safe up in the streets. Beef is when I see you. Guaranteed to be in ICU. One more time. What's beef? Beef is when you make your enemies start your cheek. Beef is when you roll no less than 30 deep.
Beef is when I see you. Guaranteed to be in ICU.
Check it. I would smoke with the
Rest of them, shout out the rest of them.
Was about 100 or more.
Maybe less of them.
Got my rocks off. That nigga from the brook just be
Styling on you.
just be
Styling on you.
They're not. Tried to warn you, but your eyes fucked up. Now I cleared them shits with hits. You on the fucking bench. All in my friends, but sometimes I can't count them.
Thieves are these we can seize.
The free all alike. I call them like I see a G. That nigga sound like me. That was grimy in the early 90s. Far behind me. It ain't hard to find me. Number one with the Booyah. Give me the Remy and the Chronic. Ain't no telling what I do to ya. It's obvious
The game's new to ya.
Get the ends you make and spend them on the tutor, One shot, I'm through with what's beef. Beef is when you need two gas to go to sleep. Beef is when your moms ain't safe up in the street.
Beef is when I see you. Guaranteed to be in ICU. One more time, what's beef?
Beef is when you make your enemy.
Mean start your G.
Beef is when you roll
That's the 30 deep. Beef is when I see you. Guaranteed to be in ICU.
Every nothing but smooth sailing. When I spit shots, now you cruise barely. All I got is keep a tough talk for you. Tie you up, cut your balls off just for you. Man, this is straight torture. Look what that slick shit brought you. A first class ticket to Lucifer. Real name Christopher. Watch me set it off like
Vivica.
Here lies your demise. Close your eyes, think good thoughts. Down while your skin start to glisten. Pale blue, hands get cold, your soul's
Risen.
It's bad cause I just been.
It makes shit more bad than just having fun. Y'all don't even know how we get down, man. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? So shout out to all the real cats out there, you know what I'm saying, that they know what to do with this crack shit. Because the crack really did ravage my community.
10 crack commandments, why?
And it's like about 20 years later, it's still caught up. We still caught up. Niggas still out here dope, selling dope crack. Through this shit, I wrote me a manual, step by step booklet for you to get.
Your game on track, got your leg pushed back. Never let no one know how much yo you hold. Cause you know that try to breed jealousy, especially if that man fucked up. Get your ass stuck up. Number two, never let them know your next move. Don't you know
That's how you know my juice is blue.
Silence and violence, take it from your eyes. I do squeeze mad clips at these cats for they bricks and chicks. Number three, never trust nobody. Your mom can take that ass up, properly gassed up, hoodie and masked up. For that fast buck, I be laying in the bushes to light that ass up. Number 4, know you heard this before. Never get high on your own supply. Number 5, never sell no crack where you rest that. I don't care if they want an ounce, tell them bounce. Number 6, that goddamn credit, bet it. You think the crackhead paying me back, shit, forget it.
7.
This rule is so underrated, keep the family in business.
Completely separated. Money and drugs don't mix like 2 dicks and no bitch. Find yourself in serious shit.
Number 8, never keep no weight on you.
Them cats that squeeze your guns can hold drums too.
Number 9 should have been number 1 to me. If you ain't getting bags, they the fucking police. If niggas see you snitching, they ain't trying to listen. They be sitting in your kitchen, waiting to start at the number 10. A strong word called consignment, strictly for linemen, not for freshmen. If you ain't got the clientele, say hell no, cause they gon' want their money, rain, sleep, hell, snow. Follow these rules, you have mad bread to break up. If not, 24 years on the wake up. Slug hit your temple, watch your friends shake up. Caretaker did your makeup. When you pass, your girl fuck my man Jacob. Heard in 3 weeks, she
Suck a whole half a take up. If she suck a good dick, that she hook a steak up. Gotta go on pasta bake up. Word up.
Crack King, Frank Wizard.
4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It's fucked up how they ravage the black community, you know what I'm saying? And how motherfuckers went to war over the shit that was killing us, you know? Motherfuckers still have animosity to this day over certain individual over shit that they did to us. You know what I'm saying? Because we weren't in tune with what's going on to the point where we understood that they were trying to entrap us, you know what I'm saying?
Who y'all talking to?
So now we caught up, man. We caught up.
Check it out. Check it out.
I got a story to tell.
This goes out for all the niggas that be fucking bad bitches and other niggas' cribs. Thinking shit is sweet. Nigga creep up on your ass. Y'all niggas expecting. Check it. I kick flows for you. Kick down doors for you. Even left all my motherfucking hoes for you. Niggas say funky pussy whip. Nigga picture that with the Kodak. It's the night that we don't get down like that. Lay my game down right flat. Sweetness, when you talk that. Petiteness, fuck that ass fat. You got a body making living wanna
Tap that. I'm fucking with you. That bitch official though.
big harder than the missile, yo. Trying to hit it and she tripping, disappearing like a city, yo. Yo, the bitch puts the double O. With the 5 in front.
Throw me a conniving stunt.
I'm trying in front. I'ma deal with her. Finally deal with her. Fuck around and steal, huh? Then we all get laced. Television, Versace heaven. When I'm up in them, the shit she kick. All the shit's legit. She get thick from a player off the New York Knicks. Nigga trip ridiculous. The shit is blood. She stressing me the fuck. Like she was in the rush. We fucking his bed. Quite dangerous. I'm in his ass while they playing different Utah jazz. My 112 CD blast. I was past. She came twice like they last. Go for the grass. She giggled, saying I'm smoking on homegrown. Then I heard her moan, tell me I'm home. Yep, no cool for situations like this. I'm up in this broad, I know he don't like this. Now I'm like, bitch, you better talk to him before the stick put a spark to him. Fuck around, shit get dark to him. Put a part to him, lose a major part to him. On the leg, she begging me to stop, but the cat getting closer, getting hot like a toaster. Cop toast, Before my eyes could blink, she screams out, honey, bring me up something to drink. He go back downstairs, you want time to take. My brain racing, telling me to stay patient. She don't know I'm cool as a fan, got your hand.
I don't wanna fuck with my man,
but I can and I
will though.
I'm trying to chill though, even though situations
Get
kind of
ill, yo.
you came to me like a song I wrote. Told a bitch, give me a song,
Nation broke.
got just quick. Tried to talk around my face, broke the bitch up, gagged them out with the pillowcase, played the cut. Nigga coming on some narcosis shit, flashed the beat on him. He stood emotionless, dropped the glass, screaming, don't blast, get the stash, 100 cash, just don't shoot my ass, please. Nigga pulling mad cheese out the floor, put stacks in the front of that sack. The door, grab the keys to the car. All my niggas on the cell, break some weed, I got a story to tell. Y'all niggas ain't gonna believe what the fuck happened to me. When that bitch out at the club with me? Yeah. Yo, kick me up. I'm up in this bitch, man, this bitch fucking running on Nick ass niggas and shit. I'm up in the spot, so I don't know. I'm 6'5" niggas. I don't know. Yeah. Anyway, I'm up in the motherfucking spot, so I'm up in the pussy. Whatever. I thought some live. I do creep sitting up on some fucking rain down or something. Comes up to the
The nigga said one of them 6'5" niggas. I don't know. All right, man, let's get into this game, man. You know what I'm saying? You already know how we do, man. So, when it comes to crack in America, we got to look at the bigger picture. We got to see the ramifications of what's going on now. And when you look at the rap game and you look at the mumble rap and you see the inarticulate way that our people are being exploited, and you can see, like, you can basically see the IQs lowering because of the perception of what's going on. I mean, the kids are very street smart, very finesseful in their approach when they're going through emotions or whatnot. Well, as in terms of lyrical acumen, you know, cadence, vernacular, real lyricism when it comes to the game. It's lacking and it's very, shall I say, unleaded at this point. You know what I'm saying? So we should blame that all on the ramifications of crack cocaine in America and how it held us back and held us in a situation of scarcity and depravity. So when we look at this whole dynamic of crack cocaine, we gotta ask ourselves, did they really want us to fucking break out of it, or did they thought that was gonna be our demise? Well, you know the question is, you know the answer to that. It's more sinister than we could ever fathom, because Gary Webb, a CIA whistleblower, this one man that knew about the Nicaraguan scandal, where they're basically funding the war through the sale of crack cocaine in the inner city. Part of the war. I don't know what part of that is, how insidious it was, but just to have that synonymous with war and oppressing another country shows the lack of accountability or the lack of judgment on the parts of the officials in the United States, the army officials, the military officials, the military brass, the elite. This is the kind of thinking that they establish. Let's kill two birds with one stone and reaffirm our belief in what we call it? Oh yeah, reaffirm our belief in the manifest destiny doctrine. So it's a very, very sinister plot. Keep us down, keep us oppressed, keep us removed, and damn near exterminate us. Why aren't we talking about getting restitution paid for that genocide? Because it's very damning to the people that have had to suffer it, and the people that had to go through it, and the people that had to sell it because they seen their community fall apart, and they didn't want to be a statistic, and they didn't want to be a part of they didn't want to be a victim of a system that was broken and meant to break us down. So let's look at this situation from a closer perspective, and I'm gonna break it down for y'all real quick and real slick. I don't do no sucker shit. When I tell y'all something, it comes straight from the heart. You know what I'm saying? And I play my part, and I did it from the start. So y'all already know how I get down. I'm gonna show y'all.
This little dot has massive implications. This little dot in the middle of South Central LA affected the course of the nation. This was one of the first arrests of a crack user in 1981. So what does this dot have to do with you? A lot more than you might know. As early as 1981, reports of the alleged crack epidemic began surfacing in Los Angeles. Crack rock was cheaper, purer, and easier to get than traditional cocaine, and it took lower income areas by storm. By 1983, the epidemic had taken hold of the city, turning communities into war zones. And soon, crack became a national crisis.
Today, there's a new epidemic, smokable cocaine, otherwise known as crack. It is an uncontrolled fire.
Reagan's Anti-Drug Abuse Act imposed harsher sentences on crack than traditional cocaine use, leading to a decades-long debate that the law was unfairly targeting minorities in low-income neighborhoods who couldn't afford the more expensive cocaine powder. Incarcerations in LA skyrocketed. By 1995, the California Department of Corrections increased its Black and Latino inmates from 21,476 to 88,376, more than a 400% increase.
Thus creating the Bloods and the
This led
Crips.
to broken families, an overblown foster care system, increased violence,
Giving them a way to
and
make
skid
money.
growth that crippled the nation. That's until a long overdue correction was made. In 2010, Obama put an end to Reagan's Anti-Drug Abuse Act. While many feel it was too little too late, it was a step towards correcting a racially skewed prison system. But was it enough? Now there are recent debates about a return to Reagan-era laws. Is the war on drugs proving to be a success or a failure? Let us know your thoughts in the comments.
Yeah, see that one? They had us caught up on some type of bullshit in 2010. Obama had to come through and make the laws, what you call it? Make the laws somewhat fair. Even the word fair is kind of racist because what do you call white people? Fair skin, right? So fair must be white and white must be right. Ha! Yeah, you see how they get down? That ain't my type of get down, but that's they get down, you know what I'm saying? So when I look at it, I put it all into perspective. I gotta sit back and think.
This little dot has massive implications.
I gotta look at it and be like, Who's behind all this? Who's behind all of this? So you got Gary Webb, a whistleblower in the whole situation. A white man. I'm mad. And you gotta ask me, like, what does the white man have to do with this? They got everything to do with this. Because why is there a white man whistleblower? All the black people telling y'all, hey man, you're fucking us over here. We need help. How y'all gonna help us? And we turn around and say, bro, we can't help you, man. We ain't got no proof, man. Y'all just look strung out. For no reason at all. And you got this white man telling y'all exactly what we've been telling y'all from the jump. Now it's being taken seriously. See, these are the type of things that they put into play. So let's look at it even deeper. Shout out to all the real folks out there that see the open for what it is.
And it draws lots of this. And it gets newspapers.
Oh, pirates, yes, they rob I, sold I to the merchants.
My name is Gary Webb. I am an investigative journalist. I've been an investigative journalist for about 25 years for daily newspapers. And in 1996, I wrote a series.
See what Bob did to my people?
CIA involvement. What my story showed was that the cocaine that was being sold in those neighborhoods was coming from mainly one source. And this one source was being used to finance the guerrilla war in Central America. The general idea of the CIA dealing drugs was something that the American mainstream press had never written about before. And that's why it prompted outrage among blacks, among drug reform activists, among politicians, by the CIA, by every federal agency involved in the drug war, because it showed they weren't doing their job. That it was a fraud. Well, right after we published the stories, the support we got from the media was very favorable. Newsweek magazine did a big piece on the story and said it was well documented and well researched. The website was getting like 1 million hits a day. There were marches in Watts, there were marches in Compton, there were candlelight vigils. Every California senator demanded an official investigation. So the story itself is really building momentum. The government reaction was no reaction. And this, I believe, was a very careful strategy because nobody was going to believe the government if they came out and said we would do it. The proof was fairly overwhelming since we had all these government documents showing that it didn't happen. So what happened was they let the so-called liberal press speak for them. And they had the national security reporters at the Washington Post, who coincidentally used to work at the CIA, write stories saying, it doesn't mean anything. It was a distraction from what the story said, and it became sort of a media war between the Mercury News, which stood behind the story at that point, and the rest of the established media.
Cold-hearted, cold-killers, you know what it is.
And part of that reason was because these major newspapers had written about this issue back in the 1980s, but had written about it very dismissively, as if this is nonsense, it should never happen. And then 10 years later, we came back with documentation showing that it was absolutely true, and that it was worse than we had gotten the story out around them. And we had gotten it out in a big way that they could control, and that was through the internet. And I think a lot of this was directed to Mercury, which is to say, We don't care what documentation you have. We don't care what kind of story you got. We set the national news agenda. And if we don't like the story, we will kill you regardless of the truth. The media rejoiced when this came out because it meant they had won. They had forced the newspaper to back away from the story that was true, simply because of this barrage of criticism, of mindless criticism, that really took its toll on the editors of the newspaper, and they were being seen as sort of outcasts from the club. And
So what does that tell you? I'm going to tell you exactly what that means.
Take a dive on this story.
This
and,
means
get back to the good graces
that
of
the
rest of
mainstream media all along was working with white supremacy to
It was essentially a
undermine.
war between my editors and myself because I wouldn't apologize for the story or back away from the story, and I fought them.
Progress and the
And so they
constructive
transferred me to a bureau that's 140 miles.
views and attributes of the black community.
I folded sick a lot.
So no matter what we did to make sure our community was safe, structured, had the right
One of the things I'm proudest of
situations, had the right
is the website that Mercury set up, because it really was the first time
stipulations
that a newspaper
on how
brought
we're
its
going to
readers
conduct our
into
affairs.
the interior of the
I
paper.
always had a monkey wrench
But it's
thrown
the
in there
reporter's notebooks.
by the CIA, which is the
this was a
Central
story
Intelligence
that,
Agency,
as I told my
right?
editors, had very high
Is it really
equities over
cracking
fact.
America?
A lot of people are going to say this can't be true. And this story became a sensation because of the website, not because of the story, but because people could get to it. And they could never have gotten to it before because the San Jose Mercury News is a small regional newspaper in Northern California that you couldn't read if you lived in New York, or you couldn't read if you lived in LA. But this story you could read anywhere in the world and see all of our documentation. So it became, and we did this on purpose to make it very hard to knock down, to make it very difficult for people to say this didn't happen. But they said it didn't happen anyway.
Oh, pirates, yes, they rob I, sold I to the merchant ships. Minutes after they took I from the bottomless pit, but my hand was made strong by the hand of the Almighty. We forward in this generation triumphantly. Won't you help to sing
This songs and
of freedom? 'Cause all I ever had, redemption songs, these songs of freedom.
R.I.P. Gary Webb, man. You know,
Authentic journalism is telling people
they tried to break us
the
down.
government doesn't want them to know.
So in order to break us down, they had to lie to us, cheat us, drug us, create abortion clinics in our neighborhoods. Now what? They created a virus.
So I started before people.
So I'm gonna tell y'all like this. If this is the level that they're on and they won't stop until we create an atmosphere where they can't bring no type of unfortunate situations to us, because they won't have enough power and manpower to do so. So they take calculated they took calculated methods in order to reduce our population, you know. I'll tell you like this. There's no way that they were going to do something to boost us up. That's not in their repertoire. That's not in their whole makeup, you know. So what we have here is a shameful display of cowardice. They couldn't come in the ghettos and harm us because they knew that we had a strong force and we're still living off of the civil rights era, you know, where we wanted to militarize ourselves and be self-sufficient. And they looked at that and they saw, hey, why not completely destroy their whole family structure and leave them without to this day, and having us fighting a systematic white supremacy and oppression. Now the cops have their foot on our necks, literally killing us, shooting us back, shooting us when we have our gun license, shooting us just because we're black. So all in all, what's the true understanding of what's going on? There's no real depiction of what should be. So we're caught up in a situation of what if this, what if that? How do we get out over this hump and that? When we're financially deprived and starved to the point where we don't even know where our next check is coming from. So we have the spirit of you know, being conscientious and knowing that despite whatever happens, we still got to provide for our family and stay on top of our knowledge and know-how, you know, and fight the system of white supremacy head on. And for years, it's been falling on deaf ears until now, you know. We got these uprisings. Well, everybody sees it, but it's kind of like a deja vu, you know, where they try to kill two birds with one stone. And it's always going to be that way if we don't see that we all have a common enemy, and that's the system of racism and white supremacy. You know? So I'm not taking it out of context at all when I say there's an evil amongst us. And if it's the CIA, FBI, DEA, FDA, or whatever you want to call them, some type of alphabet, boy. It's all part of a bigger scheme. To undermine us, to keep us subjugated, because they know without us they can't keep the charade going on. So they need us, but they need us only for so much. That's why they hate us. Because they can't do without us. See, there's a very thin line between love and hate.
Next, allegations of CIA drug trafficking.
Once you're
Monday,
evil,
the House Select Committee on
things like that
Intelligence heard
happen.
testimony concerning a
So let's
report
look at this
alleging the agency's
allegations
involvement in
of
trafficking
CIA
cocaine to the Los Angeles area.
trafficking.
Florida Congressman Porter Goss chaired
Let's talk about it.
yesterday's hearing, which includes testimony from California Representatives Maxine Waters and Juanita Millender McDonald.
Committee will be in order. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. The committee, House Permanent Subcommittee on Intelligence, is here today to review the report of the CIA Inspector General regarding allegations made in a 1996 newspaper series that the CIA was involved in the trafficking of crack cocaine to California during the 1980s. Before we begin, I'd like to advise members of the public today of how we intend to proceed with the hearing. The House National Security Committee has graciously allowed us the use of this room this afternoon, and we appreciate it and say thank you for that. We have been advised, however, that our lease on this space does expire at approximately 5 o'clock, and so we're planning that our proceedings will end accordingly. At the conclusion of my opening statement, I will recognize my colleagues on the committee for any opening remarks they wish to make, and I'm advised they do. Then we will proceed to hear from members of Congress who are not on our committee who have indicated their interest in sharing their assessment of the CIA IG report. We will then proceed with the testimony of Mr. Frederick P. Hitz, the Inspector General of the CIA, beginning his presentation no later than 4 p.m. I thank all present here today for assisting us in sticking to this schedule. Today's hearing marks an important step in the ongoing process of inquiry the Intelligence Committee has undertaken to assess the validity of highly serious allegations presented in a three-part series of newspaper articles published in the San Jose Mercury News at the end of the summer of 1996. Those articles detailed allegations that the CIA was involved with or was somehow complicit in the trafficking of crack cocaine to California during the 1980s. The articles further allege that proceeds from those transactions were used to assist in financing the activities of the resistance movement in Nicaragua, known to most of us simply as the Contras. This committee undertook an investigation into these charges in the fall of 1996. Since that time, we have interviewed more than 24 individuals who may have knowledge or information relevant to the allegations put forth in the San Jose Mercury News stories. In addition, we have reviewed many thousands of pages of original documents from the CIA that have direct relevance to our inquiry. During this time, two separate Inspector General investigations have been conducted. The CIA IG's review, which is the subject of today's hearing, resulted in the public release in January of this year of Volume 1 of an expected 2-volume report. A second volume, which goes beyond the allegations relating to the California story, is, we are told, nearing completion. There has also been an investigation conducted by the Inspector General of the Department of Justice. Although that inquiry isn't concluded, we are told, we have also been advised that the Attorney General, Department of DOJ, is for the time being withholding public release of the IG's report based on law enforcement concerns. As we proceed with our own inquiry, our committee is grateful for the work of the CIA IG on the matter before us. It is my judgment, based on a careful reading of Volume 1 of the report, which is a public document, that it is thorough and it represents months of careful review of the allegations and relevant facts pertaining to the allegations raised in the San Jose Mercury News. Given the serious nature of the allegations that have been raised, this investigation has to be especially thorough and persistent. Of course, we are continuing to conduct our own independent inquiry into this matter as part of our proper oversight responsibilities. We are keenly aware that this entire episode has fueled suspicions some people have about the advent of the scourge of crack cocaine in the United States. Any suggestion of government complicity in that terrible outcome is one that must be seriously considered and answered. It is our obligation as the committee charged with the responsibility of overseeing the CIA to address these concerns, to examine the facts as exhaustively as possible. It will be extremely difficult to come up with an absolute answer that will remove all doubt. Such is the nature of these cases. That said, I believe the American people have a right to expect us to do a conscientious job in understanding the facts and in offering conclusions from this committee about the charges that have been made. I believe that the CIA IG has presented our committee with a solid body of work that will assist us in that regard, and we intend to consider his conclusions very carefully. That is exactly what we are doing today, and what we will continue to do until we are satisfied that we have fully reviewed this matter. Our inquiry will continue as we proceed to conduct interviews and research as necessary. We will review the additional work product of the CIA IG when it becomes available to us, as well as the DOJ IG report when the Attorney General releases it. Additional hearings and public statements by this committee as to the progress of our work will be forthcoming as we deem appropriate in the committee. With that, let me again welcome our witness today, my colleagues, and I yield to Mr. Dix for opening remarks he wish to make, and other members as well. We welcome Mrs. Herman and Mr. Gibbons, who have come in since the gavel went down. Mr. Dix.
Mr. Chairman, it would be difficult to overstate the seriousness of the allegations generated by the series of articles that appeared in the San Jose Mercury News in August of 1996. That any agency of government would be charged with being associated with illegal activity is bad enough. That the allegations would involve the CIA, whose activities must necessarily take place in secret and are therefore not generally scrutinized by the public, make it worse. Add the fact that the illegal activity involved narcotics trafficking, one of the chief law enforcement and security challenges facing the nation. And the reason for concern in Congress, within the administration to include the president, and in the country should be obvious. Early in September of 1996, after being assured by Director of Central Intelligence John Deutsch that the CIA's Inspector General would conduct a thorough investigation of the issues raised by the Mercury News-ish series, I asked the committee's former chairman, Congressman Larry Combest, that our panel conduct its own inquiry. I commend Mr. Combest for his decision to authorize a committee review, and I commend our current chairman, Mr. Goss, for his decision in March of 1997, when he became chairman, to rededicate the committee to this effort as a priority in the 105th Congress. I continue to believe that as important as the reports of the CIA and the Justice Department Inspector Generals are, the committee's independent inquiry is essential. I've seen Mr. Hitz's investigation characterized as the most extensive undertaken by the Inspector General. The statistics on numbers of pages of documents reviewed and numbers of people interviewed are impressive. The task of proving a negative is always daunting, at least in part because you begin with the certain knowledge that you cannot reach conclusions with which everyone will agree. The best defense against unjustifiable criticism of an investigation of this kind, however, is to ensure that it is as exhaustive as possible. In the two-page summary of Volume 1 released by the CIA on January 29, 1998, the phrase "no information has been found" was used 9 times. I want to be assured that this phrase was meant to convey the message that no information was found on a certain point because none existed, rather than the message that the information was not found because the effort to find it was not thorough enough. The public's judgment about the adequacy of the work of the Inspector General's investigators will be what ultimately sustains or calls into question the conclusions of this report. There have been published criticisms by at least one of those contacted by Mr. Hitz's staff that the interview seemed to be designed to go through the motions. I want Mr. Hitz, who I've known and have great respect for, to assure us that he is satisfied that the investigation was as thorough as necessary to uncover the facts on the matter at hand. I understand that a number of persons, almost all of them former CIA officials, either refuse to be interviewed or sought to limit the interviews. At least one of the individuals who refused to be interviewed by the Inspector General showed no similar reluctance to be interviewed by the press. I consider the failure of these people to assist the Inspector General in this investigation to be inexcusable. The President, the Attorney General, and the Director of Central Intelligence promised the American people in 1996 that the executive branch's inquiry would get to the bottom of the Mercury News related charges. That effort has not been helped by the decision by individuals not to be cooperative. I look forward to discussing with these individuals soon the reasons for their decisions and the information they may have about the subject of the Inspector General's inquiry. When DCI Tenet released the Volume 1 report on January 29th, he noted that the concern at the CIA that the allegations had left an indelible impression that the CIA was somehow responsible for the inner city drug scourge and that nothing could be done to undo that damage caused by that false impression. It is regrettable indeed that what was at stake for the CIA's reputation in this matter was not more clearly seen by all of those from whom the Inspector General sought cooperation. One of my chief concerns in this matter has been that the investigation not be too narrowly focused. I wrote to DCI Deutsch in September of 1996, advising him that I was particularly interested in the extent of knowledge by CIA officials of any involvement of members of the Nicaraguan Contras or individuals associated with them in drug running activities, when that knowledge was obtained and what was done with the information. I was assured by a CIA official on September 17th that the director shares your view that the extent and disposition of any knowledge by CIA officials of Contra involvement in drug trafficking must be assessed. I understand that much of that assessment takes place in Volume 2, and I look forward to discussing it with the Inspector General when that volume is made available to us. Mr. Chairman, I look forward as well to the comments our Congressional Committee will have on Mr. Hitz's work. I encourage them to make available to us any information they may have on the matters before us. I welcome them, and I welcome Mr. Hitz and his presentation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Dix, very much. I have been advised other members wish to have opening remarks. At this time, I recognize distinguished gentleman from California, Mr. Julian Dixon.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I join you and the ranking minority member in welcoming members of Congress and Mr. Fred Hitz, Inspector General of the Central Intelligence Agency. Let me begin by saying that I've read the Inspector General's report entitled Allegations of Connections Between the CIA and the Contras in Cocaine Trafficking in the United States, Volume 1, the California Story. I find the section of the report that chronicles the political history of Nicaragua from 1912, when U.S. Marines occupied Nicaragua to protect U.S. economic interests, until the elections of Viola Chamorro on February 25, 1990, was extremely valuable and insightful. For it's important to know that the Contras never were a single unitary organization. The term Contras, meaning counter-revolutionaries, was one used to identify organized forces opposed to the Sandinista regime. In my view, one cannot begin to understand the forces at play in Nicaragua's revolution without having this historical recounting as a foundation. It is apparent to me that Nicaraguans of various political persuasions made financial contributions to the Contras and to the Sandinistas. Some of these contributions were undoubtedly the results of proceeds from illegal activities, such as narcotics trafficking. Nevertheless, the mere fact that an organization receives support from the fruits of illegal activities does not necessarily mean that the organization itself nor its causes are illegitimate. For example, Ricky Ross acknowledges donating some of his crack proceeds to inner city community programs. These programs provide alternative after-school activities for our youth and are worthwhile in value, and in no way diminished by the fact that some drug proceeds contributed to the operating capabilities. As has been said by the chairman and the ranking member, we're here today as a result of a three-part series of articles entitled Dark Alliance, published in the San Jose Mercury News. This series of articles alleged that the CIA, in conjunction with the Nicaraguan drug network, introduced crack cocaine into Los Angeles and then funneled proceeds from the sales of crack to Contras to help fund their war against the ruling Sandinista government. In the high speed of the digital age of information technology, the Dark Alliance series quickly spread from beyond the Mercury News readers. The series was placed on the paper's website of the internet, where, according to the Mercury News, it received more than 1,000 hits a week. Additionally, talk show stations made it their leading story for weeks, and network television gave considerable time to reporting the story on the evening news. The fact that the story has resonated so powerfully outside the minority communities should not come as a surprise. The plague of crack is no different from the way that alcohol and other drugs have infiltrated communities across America, leaving a path of death and destruction in its wake. There are no soul alliances between crack cocaine and minority communities. The spread of crack cocaine in predominantly majority suburban communities is well documented and no longer remains a secret. Whether drug use occurs in minority or majority communities is not the issue. I firmly believe that we in Congress, as well as the administration, have placed a tremendous amount of emphasis, as well as dedicated resources, to efforts designed to combat narcotics. Drugs tear at the very fiber of our nation, the family structure. Caucasian, Asian, African American, and Hispanic families have begun to be destabilized by drugs, resulting in lost generations of our youth and raising drug-related crimes. The allegation that an entity of the federal government may have been involved in the trafficking of crack cocaine in any community of America are serious charges and deserve the attention of the highest level of government. As a demonstration of the seriousness attached to the Mercury News allegation, as Mr. Dix has indicated, the former director of Central Intelligence Agency, John Dortch, made an appearance in South Central Los Angeles to reaffirm his commitment to undertake a thorough internal investigation and to definitively respond to all questions surrounding this matter. Today's hearing is an extension of this committee's commitment to effectively discharge our oversight responsibility and independently investigate the allegations raised by this series of articles. In the aftermath of the Mercury News series, a number of newspapers initiated their own investigation of the allegations of CIA involvement in drug trafficking in support of the Contras. The Los Angeles Times was one newspaper and concluded, and I quote, "The crack epidemic in Los Angeles followed no blueprint or master plan. It was not orchestrated by the Contras or the CIA or any single drug ring. No one trafficker, even the kingpins who sold thousands of kilos and pocketed millions of dollars, ever came close to monopolizing the trade." End of quote. The New York Times and the Washington Post too reached similar conclusions as a result of their own independent investigation. After allegations raised by a postscript Mercury News article is that within 48 hours of the execution of a search warrant by the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department on a number of alleged Contra sympathizers, CIA agents showed up at the Sheriff's Department and removed evidence that had been seized. The Sheriff's Department of Los Angeles County has investigated these allegations, along with assertions that local narcotics agents knew that a drug ring operated by the Nicaraguan Contra rebels was selling large amounts of cocaine and using the profits to support the armed conflict in Nicaragua. The Sheriff's Department's investigation concluded that no evidence had been found and that no materials had been removed from their custody by anybody, and that there was no evidence to support the claim that local law enforcement officers knew of a Nicaraguan-backed cocaine ring. The House Intelligence Committee is in possession of a 4-volume sheriff's report totaling more than 4,000 pages. On Sunday, May 11th, the San Jose Mercury News executive editor, Jerry Seps, wrote an article entitled "To the Readers of Our Dark Alliance Series" that identified certain shortcomings in the Dark Alliance article. Specifically, Mr. Seps asserted that, quote, "In a few instances, we presented only one interpretation of complicated, sometimes conflicting pieces of evidence. In one instance, we did not include information that contradicted a central assertion of the series. We made our best estimate of how much money was involved, but we failed to label it as an estimate and instead reported it as fact."
So he's trying to just clean it up and say, you know, they didn't know, but they did know. What they try to do is to kill two birds with one stone. Now, if they could sell drugs in the community and lock niggas up in the process, or simultaneously killing us all, rigging us, and getting the war in Nicaragua, offer that. It is what it is, man. They're probably doing that all over the world ever since. Anyway, it's your boy, Matt Mizzle. You know my struggle. People real and feel. Forget how they feel. Peace.